new little dangle things. Okay, Patsy, you can go ahead.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the New England AWWA webinar, the Voice of Water webinar series. We appreciate you joining us today. The webinar today is going to talk about regulatory and legislative updates from our Washington, D.C. office. But first, I have a few exciting things to share with everybody. The first one, excuse me, is a really nice opportunity for those of you that are interested in joining the Community Engineering Corps. There will be a webinar on Thursday, March 20th from 1 to 2 in conjunction with both the New England and the Connecticut sections. And what the Community Engineering Corps is a way to be impactful to projects that they're involved with. And this nonprofit actually connects volunteers with underserved communities to create real-world engineering solutions that help improve lives. And we need passionate individuals like all of you. So if you would like to discover how you can get involved, lend your skills, and make a meaningful difference, please check out this on Thursday, March 20th. And then the next exciting thing that we have is another webinar that will be coming up on Thursday, April 17th. And this one is entitled Innovations for Sustainable Water Management, AI Robotics for Water Pipeline Management and Batch RO Process for Desal. Very cool. This will be an insightful webinar exploring how very cutting-edge technologies like autonomous underwater robotics and high-efficiency reverse osmosis systems are revolutionizing the water industry. In the session on Thursday, April 17th, they'll talk about enhancing water management, infrastructure optimization, and operational efficiency. And there will also be TCHs awarded for attending this webinar on Thursday, April 17th. And I'm assuming a lot of you know this. Don't forget that the annual conference for 2025 will be from June 8th to the 11th in beautiful Denver, Colorado. You can join us for the conference and be part of the journey to help ensure clean, safe water for everybody. This year's conference will focus on innovation solutions, elevated standards, and collaborative efforts shaping the future of water. So we'll all come together to learn, connect, and inspire change. So don't miss the opportunity to network with other water professionals from literally around the globe and discover the latest advancements during bringing our industry forward. And then the next thing is from Tom Barger and myself, who are both chairs of Government Affairs Committee. I am the chair of the New England AWWA Government Affairs Committee, and Tom is the contact for the Connecticut section's Government Affairs group. And this group is really important because what we do is play a very vital role in amplifying the voice of water across the New England region and with our states specifically. This is an opportunity for us to ensure that water utilities hear what our common issues are, potential solutions, and also help ensure the future of our water to be safe and abundant. If you are interested in government affairs, please contact myself. My email is on here, patsy-root@idex.com. Or you can contact Tom Barger at the Connecticut section at tbarger@rwater.com. And very excited to tell you that at the end of this webinar, we're going to have a drawing. And Elaine is going to be in charge of the drawing at the very end, so you have to be present at the end. Yes, we're sneaky like that. And then also I wanted to make sure that you know what we're giving away, which is the M5 module from titled the Water Utility Management. It also covers, the first chapter actually covers utility management and regulations, which kind of ties into today. And also at the end of this webinar, an email will be sent to you, giving you your TCH certificate. And if you have any questions about that, you can reach out to us and let us know. So now, excuse me, I am very pleased to present the speaker for today, Steve Vai, in our Voice of Water webinar. So Steve is the director of the Federal Relations for the AWWA, and he works out of our Washington, D.C. office. His primary responsibility is working with the EPA and other federal agencies on developing regulations that affect the water sector, us. Steve's professional experience is focused on regulatory compliance related to the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Clean Water Act, and solid and hazardous waste regulations. He's also involved in water policy related to reducing the risks to drinking water, sustainable water infrastructure, adequate water supply, and management of water quality in the built environment. And Steve, we are very happy to have you with us today. I'm going to close my slides and let you share your screen.
Thank you very much, Patty and Patsy, and appreciate the opportunity to be here today and give a brief overview of federal activity as it relates primarily to drinking water. So the slides have been put up. Sometimes they seem to take a minute or two to load. I'm going to go ahead and assume the slides are going to catch up with me. Tell me if they don't. Just in the way of an outline, we talked about in the advertisement for this session that we'd cover the PFAS drinking water standard and the lead and copper rule improvements. We're going to do that as well as the MDBP, microbial and disinfection byproducts rulemaking that's underway. But then I want to go ahead and talk through some of the other Safe Drinking Water Act processes that are ongoing and some of the other contaminants that are coming to the fore. I guess before I really get into the rulemakings, everybody on the call realizes that we've had a change in administration. With that change in administration, right now we're in a period of uncertainty about how the new administration is going to proceed with rulemakings that are recently finished, and what priority they'll place on some of the rulemakings that are in process. And at the end of the day, water systems have to be compliant when the rule is effective and the compliance date occurs. So right now, our standing advice is the rules that are in effect, let's be thinking about how to comply with them. Let's be taking steps to comply. There's no surety that there's going to be any change as a function of this administration and the policies that you hear about on the nightly news. So I'm moving through these slides with the thought that there are rules in place, at least for PFAS and for the lead and copper rule improvements, that folks need to be thinking about how to comply with, given their how quickly those timelines are going to pop up on us. So I'm sure everybody in this webinar has already spent some quality time with the per and polyfluoral fluoroalkyl substances drinking water standard. It's got the several MCLs that are here on the slide. It also incorporates the hazard index, which captures a couple of other PFAS. The thing that I was hoping to add that was probably new from what you've already read several times, is that it's really not possible to overestimate or the need to really get that initial monitoring done and to get started on determining if you will have to install treatment or find another source. When we look at the MCLs that we have for PFOA and PFOS, the MCL's at 4, and the practical quantitation limit is there, but the trigger level for in the rulemaking is really at 2, where you get caught up into additional monitoring. So there's an expense, but there's also being able to communicate with your public about being on top of the rulemaking, about being prepared to find an alternative supply, to find what's the appropriate treatment for you. And that data stream is going to come sooner in the rulemaking than compliance with the installation of treatment. The hazard index, again, something all of you have read about or heard about. It's new to a rulemaking. It's been a concept that existed underneath Superfund and used in other forums as a screening technique to get a general feel for whether or not a combination of contaminants as a whole represent a hazard. This is the first time it's been embodied in an actual regulation as a standard of care. And it's certainly the first time it's been done underneath SDWA. We have to use the hazard index MCL the same way we would a concentration-based MCL, and that's the point here. We're looking at a rolling annual average for either the PFOA, PFOS, the other simple MCLs, and this more complex calculation. Another point, just I know everybody here on the call recognizes it, but we always talk about the technologies associated with an MCL, because the statute requires establishing a best available technology. So there are several BATs for this rulemaking: granular activated carbon, ion exchange, nanofiltration, and RO. The thing about an MCL is an MCL doesn't require that you install treatment. An MCL is based on meeting that concentration. And so you do have more flexibility under the MCL construct than you would underneath a treatment technique, where a particular treatment is described and that is what you shall do to comply. So looking at the full gamut of options you have beyond these specific technologies, finding alternative supplies being an easier option, perhaps regionalization. There are a number of ways to manage your PFAS level and not actually find yourself in one of these BATs. Again, thinking ahead as opposed to waiting for the deadlines to occur. In the way of helping members prepare, the AWWA Standards Council has recently completed a review approval and is going to publish in March a new single-use ion exchange standard, B104, and it was particularly revised with PFAS in mind. I've mentioned the PFAS rule schedule several times. April 2027, initial monitoring. At the end of the day, yes, you have to be compliant with the MCL by April 26, 2029. But look at the schedule here. You begin monitoring for compliance monitoring April 26, 27. So you'll be able to calculate a 4-quarter running annual average for each of those MCLs prior to April 26, 2029. And so that means that you can be out of compliance as of April 27 if you calculate a running annual average at that point and it's over an MCL. That backs your time to make investments in characterization, treatment decisions, and installation of treatment with all the financing and logistics that are associated back well into 28 and perhaps further, if you've got a high level of PFAS or a situation where maybe you're at the bubble, but you can't reliably stay underneath the MCL without that additional treatment or change in supply. One aspect of this rulemaking and the change in administration to keep in mind is that a lot of times we wait for EPA to provide guidance that provides additional clarity about a rulemaking. That was going to be on a slow roll to begin with this rulemaking, but it's even going to be slowed to a greater degree now by the fact that there's an administrative transition and things are going to be jumbled for now for a while, and then they've got to get started again and get back to the things that they had intended to work on to start with. The primary priorities for the states and for EPA are going to be getting states to take on primacy, so guidance to states, and then a guidance document that's really geared towards simplifying the rule for small systems. So as a piece that they've done now that's very helpful is these fact sheets that are up on EPA's website. They've been up there for going on 2 months now, 3, and they do a nice job of spelling out the rule in a way that is more understandable than trying to read the Federal Register notice. And in particular, the 2 memoranda here at the bottom of the page. They go to how you can use your UCMR unregulated contaminant monitoring rule data, and that's important because the data that you have in hand may not meet the criteria for use in the rule unless you go back to the laboratory and get additional clarification. So now would be a good time to make sure you've read those 2 memos, make sure you're actually racking and stacking the data in a way that's appropriate for making those initial determinations, taking advantage of that historic data that you can, and then rolling forward to collect any new data you need. Another item that's in here is that there's instructions on how to use significant figures and rounding. It's worth reading. Some of the practices that are incorporated in there are the same ones you learned in 7th grade, but there are other pieces of it that you may not be as mindful of, and you need to follow those rounding rules to make sure that you're actually doing the calculations correctly. When you're working with this LOA concentration for the PFAS that are in the rule and the variability that's in that data, using significant digits is going to be important. And while you're staring at the data, you might also think about how you're representing it to the public, because the public is going to see it through your CCR come 2027. They're going to be hearing about it in terms of your changes that you're making, why you're going to another source, why you're installing treatment. So, and there are groups that will be FOIAing the data. Some have been highlighting JFlag data. So being very clear about what your concentrations of PFAS are is an important aspect of managing that data right now. So another source of uncertainty in this rulemaking is the judicial review that's currently underway. AWWA and the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies did request a judicial review. We have filed our initial briefs, and EPA has responded, as have the interveners. Those are all up on well, our materials are up on AWWA's website. They're at the link provided. And at this point, there is a 60-day stay in place so that the new administration can take a look at this proceeding and decide if it's going to change its footing or anything. But if you look at the slide, you'll realize that December 23, EPA did file its initial brief, and so we'll have to wait and see how the new administration proceeds. There are a lot of things going on in the lead and copper rule revisions and now implementation of the lead and copper rule improvements. A couple things of note. At present, everybody has gotten their inventory completed. They've gotten their service line material notifications out. They've documented that inventory and those notifications to their state primacy agency. And they have posted those inventories in a public place. If those things haven't been done, they need to be made to happen. Those were all aspects of the lead and copper rule revisions that are solidly behind us now, and you should have done those to comply. As the lead and copper rule improvements are now what's in front of us, the service line notifications continue on an annual basis. That was a change in the final rule. But probably the most important thing in the rulemaking that proceeds from the LCRR going forward is if you exceed the action level for lead, you have to go to public notice, tier 1 public notice. So within 24 hours. That means that today you should be able to pull down off the shelf a compliant PN notice that you can share with your primacy agency and be ready to put out the door in a timely fashion. You also will need to think about how you come to know that you're in exceedance of the action level. So is the state telling you and that becomes the moment when the 24-hour clock starts? Or where is the SOP inside of your organization where you recognize that you have a action level exceedance and you need to act? That if that is a set of SOPs you haven't already worked through, again, that's something to get behind you as soon as possible, and be square on. A piece of that preparation is also being sure that you have the contact information to make a direct notification to EPA. That's a new requirement that existed in the LCRR, both proposal and final, and now it's the requirement. There is some confusion about what public health information to include in CCRs at this point. But there is clear PM notice templates that are up on EPA's website. There is clear customer notification language up there on the website that you can work through with your state. As we think about the lead and copper rule improvements moving on out into compliance, to the degree you can, take service lines out of the unknown category or out of the lead category, galvanized requirement replacement, before the rule kicks in. You're to the good in terms of compliance. Once you're into the rule and trying to comply in that time frame, you're now marching both against an annual metric for compliance and with a 10-year timeline. If you've got a small number of problem service lines, then getting as much of that behind you before the rule actually begins to take effect in a big way in 2027 is the way to go if you can do it affordably. The thing that we often get caught up in because of the focus in this rulemaking on is the lead service lines and galvanized requirement replacement and getting onto customer property to either understand what that material is or to remove it. And that is a tremendous burden associated with this rule, and it's a challenge out in the field in many respects. But the critical part of the lead and copper rule is corrosion control, and being prepared for that action level to drop to 10 and to take samples using the new sampling protocol. So first and fifth liter samples, if there's a lead service line, using the worst of those two values when it comes to your compliance calculation, having a set of tier 1 samples that are all lead service lines or all lead service lines or homes with lead piping inside. The things that were changed in the monitoring scheme for the rule in combination with the change in the action level, we could easily be seeing 20, 30 more percent of systems with lead service lines exceeding the action level. There have been several papers presented that and EPA's own estimates show that there's going to be a substantial impact on that subset of systems. So getting a firm handle on corrosion control has become more challenging than it was back when the rule first came out. We know more. We're more careful about it. So the on-ramp to making changes in treatment is much longer, requires much more engagement with the state. The state is trying to manage many more systems than they were back in the day. And so starting now is really critical if there's any prospect that modification of corrosion control is going to be something you've got to look toward as a system. Again, this rule is AWWA went solo on this one, filing a judicial review for a judicial review. There are a couple of interveners on behalf of EPA defending the rulemaking. When I prepared this slide, we had not yet heard back from the court. Today we heard that the court did grant a stay for the administration to consider its position. Again, yes, there is a judicial review ongoing. We don't even have a schedule for it. So the prudent thing here is for systems to be staying on top of the rule requirements and moving forward in a manner that's appropriate for your priorities within your community for compliance. Again, EPA prepared several very helpful fact sheets. They're up on EPA's website at the page that's listed. They are much more understandable than the preamble and much more understandable than the presentations that you often see, but they require careful read. So take some time, read through these. There are still turns of phrase that are important, that are undefined. So we're still working through things that would typically be dealt with in guidance. And to some degree, once you get to those questions, it's a matter of talking with your state. So an example would be what is a limit on access? So you realize in the rule, as y'all have all read it, that the lead and copper rule revisions improvements require removing lead service lines when you have access. But the legal standard of care for what access is not defined in the rule. It's not defined in the docket in any form. That's a conversation for you with your general counsel, with your counsel, and eventually it'll be a conversation with the state. So that level of ambiguity is not dealt with, but the way the agency intended for the provisions to be read is much clearer in these fact sheets. We've been focused on rulemakings like PFAS and the lead and copper rule, but another one that is final is the consumer confidence report revisions. It is an important rulemaking for the sector. The agency finalized a rule that in many ways is quite helpful. In particular, we had been working, or many systems had been working with electronic delivery as a option that was available through guidance. And it's always a safer place to be when you're working directly from regulatory requirement versus something that's a guidance. And so we do have that codified. The agency didn't very much from prior guidance in writing that reg text, but it's now done. We are looking at a biannual CCR now rather than just one a year. The second one can be the same as the first, as long as there aren't significant changes So violations, action level exceedances, new UCMR data, those kinds of things do lead to a revised second CCR. But the emphasis here is on delivering the information to the customer, not a complete redo and collection of data and revisioning of what is being provided to the customer. So an important construct to keep in mind. And then there are some new elements to the CCR. There's going to be a summary area. Got to talk about your service lines, inventory, and you got to speak directly to corrosion control. If those weren't already in your CCR, there'll be a need to add one or refresh the one you already have. America's Water Infrastructure Act deadlines. Everybody above 3,300 pop served is doing their second cycle of submission of their risk and resiliency assessments, and then their emergency response plans this year and next. Couple of things to keep in mind. The last administration had a very active enforcement program looking at AWWA compliance. They were not just looking at they were looking at systems broadly for AWWA compliance, systems of all sizes, and they were doing inspections and evaluating how well folks were doing, and they often found ways for those systems to improve what they were doing. So the take home from that, even if the current administration doesn't continue that same approach, is that documentation, having a solid process, documenting, and being very careful and thorough in those plan assessments and plans is both useful for you, but it's also going to be important potentially in terms of defending your work downstream. Cybersecurity is obviously a high priority in those enforcement reviews, and is something to be seriously considering here in the upcoming assessments and response plans. A Clean Water Act rule that also is taking effect here in the next couple of years, 2027 being the bright line, is the Hazardous Substance Facility Response Plan. It's unlikely that any of you would actually trigger preparing a response plan, but it is a resource that you can tap into going forward as you do your risk and resiliency plans. That's why it's positioned here in the deck. So then we have the microbial and disinfection byproduct rules. EPA is under consent order to complete the proposal by July of this year. With the change in administration, we could easily see that being kicked into the future a bit further, but they are under a legal obligation to get that rule kicked out and then finalize it in 2028. The agency elected not to do a negotiated rulemaking as they had in previous cycles for MTBP. And that said, this particular rule package does look at all of the rules that had previously been in those regnecs. So the interim enhanced subsoil treatment rule, long-term 1, LT2, stage 1, stage 2. The They did not have a reg neg, but they did have a NEDWAC work group, National Drinking Water Advisory Council work group, and they wrote a fairly extensive report, and it covers the ground that's marked here on the slide. EPA doesn't have to follow the NEDWAC recommendations. It's an advisory committee, but take a look at that list and think hard. And it's good to read the entire report. Think hard about what aspects of this might be something that you'd want to take on now, get a head start on. And then I've got a couple of slides that go to some more specifics. It's very, very certain that as the rulemaking proceeds, that the agency will move to a numeric secondary disinfectant standard. Right now, we've got a number of states, about 20, have state-specific numeric standards as opposed to detectable. And so now the question becomes, what does the detectable level need to be numerically? The graphics here from the Water Utility Disinfection Survey from 2017. And you can see the range of target concentrations that water systems are currently using for secondary disinfectant residual. And couple of take homes from that. These are values that are being monitored as we would think now, using the current total coliform rule sites. There isn't any data right now on what that graph on the left would look like if we were to change that monitoring scheme to be leaning out into more challenging parts of the distribution system, longer water age, higher risk of the residual dropping off. And yet, even with the current sampling scheme and the self-set targets for secondary disinfectant residual, you can see from the graph on the right that we already have a number of systems that are having difficulty regularly, consistently meeting their secondary disinfectant residual goals. Lots of reasons for that, but now is a time, if you haven't already, to be looking at the reliability of the field data you have on secondary disinfectant residual, understanding what that distribution is like throughout the distribution system, not just center mass or easy to get to spots. You need to be thinking about what steps you might need to take to deal with recurring low residual levels. It's highly likely that the proposed rule will not just look at all the values that you submit or you take and submit for secondary disinfectant residual, but that you would find yourself looking at individual sample sites and trying to figure out why those levels are too low and what you should be doing to fix them. So getting ahead of that. And then consecutive systems are a part of the challenge here. And so not just what is the residual level, again, center mass or routinely measured for yourself, but if you're moving water to another system or purchasing water from another system, what's the level of disinfectant residual at that point of exchange? There has been attention in this rulemaking to clear emanation and good practice there. it's a harder aspect of the rule for the agency to draft something up, but it's a possibility. And so if you're chlorinating, now would be a time to see if you can get ahead of nitrification more actively, manage nitrification, see what you can do to operate without needing to go to a free chlorine period for any issues in order to maintain that residual over time. AWWA has a number of standards for the construction and maintenance of storage tanks, water storage tanks. And there are already several rules that require sanitary defects associated with finished water storage tanks to be corrected when identified by the state. But the general feeling at this point is that the rulemaking will incorporate some sort of finished water storage inspection and maintenance requirement, where if the inspection spots something, then if it's significant, it would need to be corrected. Now is a good time to get ahead of that in terms of making sure that you've got SOPs in place for getting qualified inspectors and getting your corrections into your CIP as necessary, getting the other more routine operational maintenance kinds of things corrected on an ongoing basis. There will be a couple of rulemakings. Well, there will be certainly a rulemaking for perchlorate. It's a court case has brought it back to us. Hexavalent chromium, there's again a consent order that's going to require a regulatory determination. Right now, the IRIS risk assessment would put that the risk level of concern somewhere between 100 nanogram per liter and 10 microgram per liter. So we're looking at low part per billion, at least, concentrations if that were to roll forward into an MCL. And then chlorate is another contaminant that's highlighted in the MDBP Waterkeeper Alliance provisions. If you haven't already used the AWWA hyperchlorite assessment tool model, I'd suggest you find it on our website and take a look at it. Chloride formation through the aging and improper storage of hypochlorite is an important source. It's probably the largest source of chloride exposure. And so getting out ahead of how you store and manage hypochlorite is going to be important for you, period, to make sure you've got the free available chlorine you need. But it's also important in terms of chlorate management. There will be lots of systems impacted by a hexavalent chromium standard. We've shown some hypothetical values here. 5-10 is probably the limit of treatment at this point, 5 to 10 part per billion. But you can see that we're really talking about a large number of systems coming into installation of ion exchange or filtration. Everybody's seen the SDWA processes chart before. Let me just skip out into some of the things that are popping out of it. The UCMR 5 data has been available to you to look at since October. There are not many other PFAS in significant occurrence with a health effects value beyond those that we're currently focused on, but there are other PFAS being observed. Lithium is occurring much more frequently, and it's also a difficult conversation with your public. Really strongly encourage that you pick up the lithium in drinking water guide from AWWA's website and take a look at it. We already have 35% of systems observing and 26% above the reference level that EPA is using, 10 microgram per liter. Folks associate lithium with medical treatment. They also hear about the social science studies associated with it, and being prepared to talk with your public is important. We don't really know what EPA will put on UCMR 6. This is one where the change in administration could significantly affect the rulemaking. The staff at EPA and have a number of analytical method options that could provide enough contaminants for a full suite in UCMR 6. But until we see the proposal, we don't have a clear vision into what that would be. Regulatory determinations were all negative, but in the latest round that are open for comment, but there are 5 that are identified for continued evaluation. Strontium, 1,4-dioxane, and 1,2,3-TCP are recurring themes that the agency has evaluated through a couple of cycles now. Manganese is a new addition. For those of you that haven't taken a look at it, would suggest you read the drinking water guidelines for manganese, again on our website. Helps you take a look at the basis for the state guidelines that are in place. And just to show you some points of comparison, the EPA secondary MCL is at 50, WHO has come in at 80, and the California is now looking at a public health goal of 20 part per billion. I'm going to skip past the 6-year review for this audience and point out that both arsenic and nitrite are all in the IRIS queue. Our arsenic just popped out, but nitrate are now in it. IRIS is under considerable. There are a number of folks who are suggesting revisioning IRIS at this point, so it's not clear how fast or if the nitrate risk assessment would move forward, or if the arsenic risk assessment would be withdrawn. And then we have asbestos and fluoride coming out of the TSCA program. Fluoride, you've seen the media accounts. RFK Jr. has not taken any actions yet, but he is now at the Secretary for Health and Human Services, which oversees CDC, which is where our optimized fluoridation standards are set. Asbestos is a rulemaking in the works, and there is reason to believe that we'd see additional constraints on personnel safety, and handling constraints to avoid release of legacy asbestos materials. Think about legacy asbestos materials inside of buildings, but also asbestos pipe would be affected. And with that, apologies for moving so fast there at the end, but wanted to get to the end.
Thank you, Steve. That was really great. I so appreciate your time in helping us understand some of these very complex activities going on. We will take questions either in the Q&A or in the chat. I think we've got about 5 minutes left, Steve. One of the questions that we have here is, what have you heard, if anything, with regard to any impacts on state revolving funds or any changes associated with those that you might know about?
Right. So I guess for anybody who is dealing with an SRF loan, your primary point of contact for information on how the administration's activities are changing, the availability of your loan or what you have to do under your loan, that's your state point of contact rather than me, for sure. In what we have heard, there was a slowdown or stoppage in the release of SRF funds, but we had heard that those holds had stopped and states now had access to the SRF funds. One could imagine that the disadvantaged community aspects of the funds that are passing through the SRF would be a topic of conversation, given some of the other points of emphasis from the current administration on DEI. But I haven't seen anything on paper, don't have any information to report from actual practice.
Interesting. Okay, thanks. We have time for another question, then we're going to let Elaine do her drawing for the M5 manual. I guess a similar vein of question. Do you have any indication or any thoughts on the funding that remains for the lead line replacement, lead line improvement efforts? Do you have any thoughts on whether that will be remain the same or if it's also impacted?
I haven't seen anything that would pull it back.
Yeah, that's good, because I know we're in the throes of it. Good. Elaine, thank you so much again, Steve. We very much appreciate your time today. And I mentioned in the chat too that Steve's slides will be made available. So all of those amazing links that he included in the slide deck will be available to you. Elaine, do you want to do your drawing now?
I sure do.
Okay.
I've done a random number generator between 1 and 34. We currently have 34 attendees, and it came up at 20. And so that is Len DeYoung, and he's with the Connecticut section, and with Kleinfelter, I believe. And so, Len, congratulations. We'll be sending you Water Utility Management M5 manual, and I'll be in contact with you to get your mailing address.
Thank you so much, Elaine. That's really fun to do. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I just want to remind folks that they'll be getting an email with their certificate for the TCHs for today's webinar. And please join us Thursday, March 20th for the Community Engineering Corps meeting. And then our next webinar, which will be Thursday, April 17th from 1 to 2 on innovations in sustainable water management. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We very much appreciate your time. Take care.
Thank you, Patsy.
You're welcome.